Well, once again, welcome to our study of physical science. In this particular video, I want to spend some time focusing on two main goals. My first goal is to help you understand exactly what we're going to be doing this year, as far as the topics that we're going to be studying. And then the second thing that I want to make sure that I do is to show you how best to learn your vocabulary words via the use of flashcards. So what we're going to start with is, what are we actually studying? What is science anyway? One of the terms that you were asked to define and that you're expected to know the definition of is actually the word science. What is science? Well, your book defines it as a systematic study of the universe to produce observations, inferences, and models. Now, that contains a whole bunch of words that maybe you're not entirely sure what they even mean. So let's break that down a little bit at a time. First of all, it's a systematic study, which means that we're not going to study a leaf today, and then we might study how a car moves tomorrow, and then we might study acids and bases the next day. We're going to try to do things orderly in such a way that things make sense. We're not going to be skipping around all over the place. So when a scientist studies something, he does it in a very systematic way. He tries to do it in an organized fashion so that he can build on what he's learned before. That's why that when we study science in school, we tend to break sciences down into specific areas so that we can be very systematic and very organized about it. So what are we studying? A systematic study of the universe. The universe includes everything that God has created. Part of those things are living and part of them are non-living. And so we're studying everything in creation when we study science. So this systematic study of the universe produces observations. And we'll talk a lot about observations in a couple of videos from now when we're talking about the scientific inquiry. You've probably talked about scientific method before, but for today, I just want you to be aware that an observation doesn't have to be something that you see only with your eyes. It can be something that you hear, it can be something that you touch, something that you taste. It can be anything that you experience. If you fall, when you jump off of something, that can be an observation that happened. When you have an apple and you drop it, and it falls, that's an observation. If you throw a ball up and it eventually comes back down, that's an observation. Anything that you notice, anything that you see is classified as an observation. Then we can take those observations and we can make inferences. We can say, well, I can kind of make a generalization that if I throw a ball up and it comes back down, if I throw a marker up in the air, it's probably going to come back down. If I throw anything up in the air, it's going to come back down. And so while that's a very simplified example of making an inference, scientists do it all the time. Well, if in this particular case, I did this and this happened, therefore I could probably make the assumption that if I do it over here, something similar is going to happen. And that's one really good thing about the way God has created the world, is the fact that because he is a God of order and he created it with order and organization, we are able to see the patterns that he created, and therefore we're able to make an inference based on a few observations as to what is going to happen the next time we do something. From those inferences, then we're able to make models. And again, I'm not going to go a whole lot into that today because a model is something we're going to be talking about extensively in a day or two. But a model is basically just an idea for how something works. It's a plan. It's a simplified version of how something bigger works. We have models for how the universe is structured with the sun at the center and the planets going around the outside. We have a model for how we believe an atom looks. And so all of these models are based on observations and inferences that we've made from our study of the universe that we've done in a very systematic way. Okay, so that's the definition of science. Now, science is actually broken down into two main categories. You have your social sciences, and social sciences has to do more with people, how people interact with each other, how they interact with society as a whole. And then we also have natural sciences. Natural sciences is the area that I tend to focus on, just because you can't study everything, and natural sciences are the ones that I really enjoy. Natural sciences are broken down into three main types: physical science, life science, and earth science. Earth science specifically is going to be a study of the earth. It includes things like geology, it includes things like astronomy, it includes like the water cycle, it includes rocks, it includes volcanoes, and so that's what a study of earth science is going to include. Life science is going to be something like biology, where you're studying plants and animals and cell structure and how all of those things interact together. Probably a lot of you, once you finish your physical science class, you may very well take biology as a life science, maybe even next year, because almost all high school students will take biology. The area that we're focusing on, though, is physical science, and physical science is basically everything that is not living. And so physical science is generally broken down into physics and chemistry. Now, chemistry is, again, according to your book, the study of the composition, structure, and properties of matter. So we're looking at things down as small as atoms and molecules, how these different components come together to make compounds, how do they interact with each other. Some of you have probably made, like the typical volcano where you dump vinegar and baking soda together, and you've seen that they fuzz and foam all over the place. And so that is considered a chemical reaction. That's in the world of chemistry. When I put these two things together, how do they react with one another? What's the composition of vinegar? What's the composition of baking soda individually, so that when I put them together, they're going to react in that particular way? And so all sorts of things according in that particular area of chemistry are going to be similar to experiences that you've already had. Things like you've probably heard about acid rain, you've seen things rust, and so study of chemistry talks about all those kind of interactions of matter with each other. Now, physics is not only matter, but it's also energy, and it has to do with how matter and energy interact between each other. And so physics is going to include things such as if my car won't start and I push on the car, can I get the car to move? How do I get the car to stop once I get it moving? Why is it true that I can look up and see the sun, but then there are other times I can see a rainbow and I can see all these separate colors? How does that work? How does sound get to my ears? How does that work? What about heat? How can I make something so that I can heat my house more efficiently? How can I produce heat? And so all of that is going to be classified in the area of physics. Now, what is very true about science is that even though we may break these sciences down into specific areas, all of these areas are going to overlap with each other. So for example, if I'm studying minerals in earth science, a lot of times I'm going to be studying the chemical composition. And so chemistry and earth science are going to overlap with each other when I study the composition of those minerals in the rocks. If I'm studying a volcano that's erupting and I want to know how far the lava is going to be spewed out, that's going to be a physics discussion. So physics and earth science are going to overlap with each other. If I'm looking at life science, life sciences include how plants make food from light. Well, I already mentioned that light is included in physics, and the way that chemical reactions happen in order for them to make the food is chemistry. So the process of photosynthesis in life science also is going to involve the light from physics and the chemical reaction from chemistry. So all of these sciences actually interact together. They're not independent. So as we go through our study, I want you to be aware that these are not isolated things, but they all actually interact with each other in order to make a cohesive whole of natural science and how everything works together in our world. Okay, so that's kind of in a nutshell what we're going to be studying this year. Physical science, the physics and the chemistry aspect, but it does interrelate to everything else that you will or have studied in the past. All right, I'm going to get rid of some of this writing up here now. And what I want to do is I want to show you a method for studying the vocabulary cards that I'm going to suggest that you make so that you can learn your vocabulary words easily. In the daily lesson plans, on a lot of days, you will see that I recommend that you make flashcards for particular words that are going to be listed in that day's reading. So I think there are 4 or 5 words that I have listed for the first day. 3 of those words are science, physics, and chemistry. And so one of my own kids came up with this method for studying vocabulary words, and it worked exceedingly well for her. So I'm going to recommend it to you as well. If you have another way that you prefer to study vocabulary words, that's fine. I know there are computer apps that you can use for doing this kind of thing. I'm kind of old school. I still like to write things down because I think the physical process of writing something down helps you to remember it. It's a little bit different than typing something on a keyboard. Somehow the physical writing does help it get into your brain. But you're a big kid. I'm going to let you make that decision as to how you best want to study these vocabulary words and get them down. But here's the recommendation that I have. For the word science, for example, if you take 2 index cards, on one index card you write the word on one side in pretty big letters, and you write the definition on the other side. Now I would recommend that you could get it out of the reading. You'll probably get a concise definition if you'll flip to the back of your textbook and use the glossary and get it from there. Either way is fine, doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me, okay? So you have one card with the word on the front, the definition on the back, then take a second card and write only the word on the front. Don't write anything on the back, okay? So I have done that with science, physics, and chemistry. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, now you would do this on a tabletop. I'm putting it up here on the board so that you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take my definition side and I'm going to put that on the top so that I can see that, okay? Then I'm going to take my cards that have only the words on them, and I'm going to put those over here like this. And then what I'll do is, as I'm studying these, I'm going to try to match them up with each other. So if it says, where's my one this says the systematic study of the universe that produces observations, inferences, and models. Well, we just talked about how that's the definition of science. So I'm going to kind of rearrange this so that I have these 2 next to each other, okay? This one says the study of matter and energy and the interactions between them. Well, that's the definition of physics, so I'm going to slide that one down here. This one, the study of the composition, structure, and properties of matter and the changes that takes place. I believe that goes with chemistry, so I'm going to slide that up there. So you can see how I'm matching the definition with the words. Then I can check to see if I'm right by taking this card and flipping it over. And if I've done a good job, they should all match up with each other. So that is recommendation that I have for how you would study your vocabulary words. Again, if you have a different method that works for you, that's perfectly fine, but it's just a recommendation that I have for you. Okay?